Greetings, fellow cigar box builders, players, aficionados, and those of you who accidentally clicked on this link. Today we're going to try something a little unnecessarily complicated for our cigar box guitar build by using these. Now these are known as cedar spills. Oftentimes when you visit your local tobacco shop and procure some empty boxes, you'll find one of these hanging out inside. And what do you do with it? This video is not sponsored, although it could be, wink wink. But today we're going to try something a little creative with one of these. Like I said, it's definitely unnecessary, but I think the results will be worth it. So I began this one like any other neck that I do. First off, slotting the fingerboard, and then I'll place it along the neck, making sure it aligns properly on both the nut and the box side. Once I'm happy with that placement, I'll firmly clamp the board in place with some squeeze clamps, and I drill small locator pinholes through the fret slots. Then I'll use some ultra-exclusive premium tonewood locator pins to make sure the fretboard doesn't slide around once pressure and glue are applied. After that, I'll trim the overhang from the sides and make sure that the fret slots are deep enough for the frets. It's important to do this now because once the binding is on, well, it becomes a lot harder to do. Alright, so off camera I did some prep work here. I've got my cedar cut into strips. That's about 1/4 of an inch tall. I've got some rosewood, which is also about 1/4 of an inch tall. Measured them both. The cedar is about 20 thousandths thick. The rosewood here is about 80 thousandths. So over here, I've got my binding router bit with my 90 thousandths bearing on it, which will leave things a little bit oversized, but that's better than undersized.
That's what she said.
And then I routed out a channel for the binding. All right, now that I have my binding channel routed, I'm cutting some pieces of wood. The rosewood here, I'm doing at a 45-degree angle, so it will hopefully make a nice looking miter joint. The cedar, it's just a butt joint, but I don't think it's going to be super obvious. Doing some precision cutting here. And one of the things I want to point out is when you get to the end of the cedar, I have another piece here, but I have them split so they meet right at that fret line, meaning the fret should cover it up and it'll look like one continuous piece. I glued the inlays in first, thinking that'd be easier just to get them out of the way. And then I carefully applied some wood glue to both sides of the cedar, made sure everything was aligned, and used just a little bit of brown tape as a sort of clamp to hold things in place while the glue dried. And this corner especially, I wanted to make sure it looked good. And after that, some more of the usual fretboard stuff. I used some radius blocks to shape the fretboard, undercut the fret wire so it doesn't impact the binding, and finally installing the frets. Now at some point I decided I wanted to use more cedar and make a heel for this neck. So not only did that mean gluing another 3/4 inch slab of maple to the existing one, but I also had to make the groove in the box that much deeper as well. It took a bit of creative problem solving, but once everything was fitting right, looking good, I glued on some more cedar, and then I sandwiched it between a scrap of wood left over from the fretboard. Then, my favorite part, time to start carving. I didn't really take many pictures of this part of the process. Maybe I'll do a video on that in the future, but regardless, once it was shaped and sanded, I could start to apply some true oil. Here it is sitting next to another project that I had on the bench at the time. And once the finish had cured a week or two, it was time for fretwork. While it is a tedious process, the results here are looking pretty good. And this is just the fretboard raw. It's unfinished, it's not oiled, it's not conditioned. Once I do apply a little bit of conditioning oil, it's going to look even better. But I just had to take a moment here and appreciate that fretwork. All right, here we go. Moment of truth and such. Ooh. That's nice.
And here you can see just how big a difference that finishing oil really does make on the fingerboard. And it's looking pretty good. Eventually everything gets strung up, wired up, and we have ourselves a cigar box guitar on our hands. Here's a couple shots of the heel and the cap. You can see the lamination a little bit better in person when you get up close. It's a nice little touch, fairly subtle, but it adds just a little bit of class. That's probably what I would say about the rest of the fingerboard too. You know, when I first started doing this process, I briefly considered using white plastic binding instead of cedar. That probably would have made it pop out a little bit more, but I'm glad I didn't. I really like the way the cedar looks because it's natural wood. It gives the whole thing just a really cool look, really cool feel. I'm going to be doing this again, you know. The results definitely justify the complications in the construction. At any rate, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out my other video on this instrument if you want to hear how it sounds, as well as get a little bit more in-depth during the build process. But at any rate, I do appreciate you watching this video, and hopefully you'll come back for the next one. Till then.